Hello again, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips, joined by Wes Mitchell. Glad to have you along. Preseason practice is underway. Fall camp opened this week. We got 29 practices scheduled for the Gamecocks before they open the 2016 season at Vanderbilt on Thursday night, September the 1st. And Wes, we're 3 practices in to preseason camp. So what have we learned through 3 days here, Wes? We got a lot of questions, particularly about the Gamecock offense, a lot of new faces, going to have a lot of new players competing for playing time, really on both sides of the football. But let's start with the offense today, Wes. What have we learned after 3 days of practice?
I don't know how much we've learned. I think we're sort of all, maybe coaches and players and media alike are sort of learning as we go. I think you look at Kurt Roper yesterday. He met with the media. He talked quarterbacks, but it was almost sort of like he didn't want to show his hand yet in some instances, or in most cases, I think he just truly doesn't know yet either. This thing's going to have to play out. Obviously, there's going to be a point. I mean, we saw it last year. This isn't new. There was a quarterback battle last year. There becomes a point where you kind of say to yourself, well, they have to name a starter. They have to cut it to 2. I think they'll try to cut it down after that first scrimmage. But right now, a few days in, we didn't have availability on Thursday, but through 2 practices, as far as Brandon McElwain and Perry Orth go, they really had sort of just split it evenly. One day, the first day, Orth took the first team reps. The second day, McElwain took the first team reps. So, really, quarterback battle, I think, is something everyone has their eyes on, but at the same time, not sure we have many answers yet either.
Yeah, I enjoyed hearing Coach Roper talk about the quarterback position. And you can see that video on Gamecock Central. Wes, he was asked about Jake Bentley, who was kind of the wild card in this quarterback race, the race for the starting quarterback job. And Roper said very flatly that Bentley is about what you'd expect him to be as a true freshman, new on campus. He's a little bit lost. He's got good physical ability. There's no question he's got arm strength, and he can play the position. But Roper said flatly he's a little bit lost right now, being that it's the first week of practice. So we're looking at Orth and McElwain. Wes, you got to believe one of those 2 will probably start the Vanderbilt game, even though we still got about 4 weeks until that opener.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever completely count out other guys, but I think, those 2 guys sort of entered as the top 2. Those are the 2 guys competing. I have sort of, for a while, my gut feeling has been that Orth starts, McElwain plays, talking about the first game, just because of the experience. Roper was asked about the experience. He was asked about how much does experience play into your decision. So, and obviously Orth, great leader, great teammate. He's been a great teacher to Brandon McElwain as well. You can tell the amount of respect that Perry Orth has for Brandon McElwain, just listen to him talk. So, this is a guy that does everything right. And just the gut feel has been, maybe you go with Perry Orth and let Brandon McElwain come in off the bench. He doesn't quite have the pressure of being the guy if you do it that way. Now, if Brandon McElwain over the next 4 weeks, literally 4 weeks, 28 days away, if he, just beats out Perry Orth, then maybe you say, hey, this guy's better, we're going to start him. But I'm sort of the opinion that maybe it's a little bit easier on your true freshman if you let the veterans start and say, hey, we're going to get you in there early.
Wes, let's talk more about Kurt Roper. Since Will Muschamp got the head coaching job at South Carolina, he's been very visible, and I feel like Gamecock fans and the media that cover the Gamecocks are starting to get a pretty good feel for what Will Muschamp is all about. But Kurt Roper is a little bit different story. He did speak to the media this week, and we're starting to get to know Kurt Roper a little bit. Give us your impressions of him. A lot of questions about what the offensive system is going to look like. We know it's going to be a spread offense, and it will be up-tempo. But what indications have you gotten during this first week of practice from Kurt Roper, what the system might look like and who's going to be a big part of it?
Yeah, he first of all, when you hear him talk, he's obviously a sharp guy. Did really, really big things at Duke before he took the job at Florida for the one season. And, I think you sort of got an idea at Duke of what he's all about, what he wants to do ideally on offense. He wants to be up-tempo. He wants to be able to get up there, get to the line, snap the ball quick. But, I think this offense is going to be very much predicated on the personnel and what these guys can do. And I think they've talked extensively about sort of trying to match the offense to the personnel. Do they want to go no hurry or no huddle, hurry up? Absolutely, but you can't go up there and snap the ball 3 times, go 3 and out in 30 seconds. Nobody benefits from that, your defense, your offense, or your special teams. So, I think to go hurry up, you have to be a successful offense. So they sort of work hand in hand. You want to go hurry up, I think, after a first down, after a big play, after Muschamp talked a lot about how important chunk yardage is. You got to make explosive plays. To me, you go no huddle after you make an explosive play because you have the defense on its heels. So I know what Roper would like for the offense to look like. He wants this to be a modern spread, fast tempo, get the ball out to your playmakers in space, take the underneath stuff if it's there, take your shots when you need to. That's what he wants to be. He wants to run the quarterback a little bit. I think he's going to have to run the quarterback a little bit this year is probably the better way to say it. So I think a lot of this is, like I said, it's going to depend on the personnel. It's going to depend on what these guys can do. Probably going to have a lot of freshmen at the skill position positions as well.
Yeah, a lot of young people competing for playing time on offense for Gamecocks here in 2016. So let's stay with the offense for a moment, Wes. It looks like the offensive line group appears to be the strength of the unit to this point. At this very early juncture of preseason, South Carolina's got a pretty good group up front. Alan Knott has got 32 career starts. He's back at center. Zach Bailey, a freshman All-American a year ago, did wonderful things last year for the Gamecock offensive line. Corey Helms has transferred in from Wake Forest. We're getting rave reviews about him. Mason Zandy and DJ Park slated to start at the 2 tackle positions. So the O-line group appears to be pretty solid, certainly with the first 5. But after that is where some questions start to come in. And give us your thoughts on the offensive line, Wes. Outside of those top 5, how much depth do the Gamecocks have on the offensive line?
Yeah, well, I think you start looking at the offensive line as a strength, almost because it's going to have to be. Because if you look at them compared to your quarterbacks, compared to your receivers, compared to your running backs, that's where the experience is on the offensive side. So there's really some pressure on those guys. I think they have to lead this offense. They have to sort of be a guiding force, a consistent force, I think is probably the best way to say it up front. Talking about the depth, I think on the interior of the line, inside, they actually really do have pretty good depth. You look at a number of guys. They've got 4 guys that can play center. Inside, I think you feel good about Zach Bailey, Corey Helms, Alan Knott, Donnell Stanley. That's 4 guys that can all play guard or center. You have a starting right tackle, at least right now, a first-team right tackle in DJ Park, who's also capable of playing inside. So I think on the interior of the line, they really feel pretty good about where things are. I think once you start talking about the offensive tackle position, obviously Mason Zandy, DJ Park out there, Blake Camper's battling a little bit at right tackle for that spot. Christian Pellich, who's the true sophomore, got himself in a little bit of off-season trouble. I think that's the areas where you start to say they can't really afford to have injuries at the offensive tackle position.
Okay, looks like Gamecock offensive line is in pretty good shape at this early portion of the preseason camp here. And, offensive line is a great nucleus, a good group to build an offense around, especially when you're going to have a lot of young people or unproven players handling the football at the skill position. So speaking of that, Wes, we've been operating under the assumption most of the offseason that David Williams is the incumbent running back. He's the top returning running back. He had more rushing yards than any other running back that is returning to the team this year. But one of the most interesting comments we've heard from the coaches this week involved David Williams. Muschamp talked about him a couple of days ago, and I thought what he said was fairly insightful. Wes, tell us about it.
Yeah, I think you look at what Muschamp had to say, and just very, very pointed comments for David Williams. The fact that he's had to motivate him. He says pretty much every day you have to push him in every practice as well. So, or every meeting as well. So that's something where if you're talking about your upperclassman running back, you never really want the head coach to have to say that. And, I think we all have sort of assumed that that's the guy that had the best chance to start at that position. But, as it goes into it, he's still going to have to earn that spot. And, I think you look at David Williams, you say that he's always looked like a guy that can produce, but he's never been able to put up big numbers. So, I think a lot of people are probably very alarmed by Muschamp's strong comments. And, I think you kind of have two sides to that. You probably say, well, it is alarming because it's the guy they're obviously counting on. But the other side of that is, a coach doesn't say those things about guys that don't have talent. If a guy is just a complete bust, or if a guy doesn't have a chance, then the coach doesn't waste his time making those headlines. So, if you're a guy and your coach just stops coaching you, that's when you really got problems. That's when you probably need to find a way to transfer out. But Muschamp's still pushing those buttons. I think in some ways he probably knows he has to, because he knows he needs David Williams to be good. He needs him to be at his best. But it certainly makes that position much, much more interesting, because, I think there's a place for A.J. Turner there. I don't know if A.J. Turner is big enough to be a 20-carry back in this league. So that, again, maybe starts to push the needle towards the possibility of a freshman, Enrico Daddle. But then what are you talking about? You're already talking about possibly a freshman quarterback. You're already talking about Brian Edwards as a starter at wide receiver as a freshman. You're going to have several other freshman wide receivers in backup roles. Do you really want to have another top guy on your offense as a freshman? That generally is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, now let's be clear. Muschamp did not throw David Williams under the bus, but he said very flatly that, Williams is a guy that's got to be challenged every day, and I think Muschamp is trying to light a little bit of a fire under David Williams. The coaches are going to ask him to do a little bit more on a consistent basis in practice, because the Gamecocks are going to need him in 2016. So the Muschamp comments about David Williams earlier this week, very interesting, and you can see those on Gamecock Central as well. Gamecock Central Radio, Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell. We invite you to download the Gamecock Central Radio app on the App Store and on Google Play. To subscribe to the podcast, search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. Wes, we could fill a whole show here talking about questions with the defense, but let's summarize what we know about the defense to this point. Muschamp, known as the defensive coach, he made some comments during the offseason that safety is so thin that he's worried that he and Coach Robinson might have to start at safety for the Gamecocks this year. We don't believe it's that bad of a situation, but certainly there are some questions about safety and the defense as a whole. So I heard a media member ask about DJ Smith this week. Perhaps he's a new player that can contribute at safety. Talk about what we got at safety, Wes, and what Muschamp is doing to try to shore things up on the back end.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think Muschamp and Robinson are both out of eligibility. So I know for a fact Forrest Robinson would love to get out there again. I don't know about Muschamp actually getting out there, but he may not like that comment by me. But I think you look at what those guys do have there. You don't really have to be spectacular at safety. I think that's one position where you almost can get away with being serviceable. Now, being serviceable means not, giving up the big play, not letting that guy past you. You don't necessarily have to have a playmaker at safety. So you kind of consider those facts, and you say, I think they can be okay there because they do have some athleticism. I think Chaz Elder stepped up a little bit this spring, had a decent spring. DJ Smith's a guy that's always been talented. There's even talk about he could possibly play some cornerback. He's got good size there. He covers a lot of ground. He can move. He can hit. It's all about consistency with him. He needs to have consistently good practices and show those guys they can count on him, because, again, safety is a spot where consistency is very, very important, because a lot of times you're talking about the last line of defense, or if you're in a zone, either taking the middle third or one of the halves of the field. So when you're talking about those things, that guy's got to be comfortable with his role on every single play, even if he's not necessarily making a big play. So I think that's the big thing with the safeties.
All right, and some of our future podcasts coming up here in the next couple of weeks before the start of the season, we'll talk more extensively about specific groups. We'll talk about the linebackers. We'll talk about defensive line, and we'll talk more about the offense. But wanted to start with a quick discussion about the safety position today because that's been a major concern for Gamecock fans and coaches alike during this off season. So we'll get to more on Gamecock football. Wes, just 3 practices in, but we're learning more about the team every day. It's a fun time of year.
Absolutely, and we'll learn more on Friday when Javaris Robinson and the defense meets with the media after practice.
All right, Gamecock Central rolling out a ton of content on Gamecock football right now. Scott Hood's got a piece on the Gamecock offensive line group. If you'd like to read more about that, just check out Gamecock Central. Wes, good talking with you as always. We'll do it again real soon. Thank you, bud.
All right, man. Sounds good. I'll talk to you then.
He's Wes Mitchell, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us.